She was last seen on a CCTV camera on Rodney Street in Salford at approximately 7:30 in the evening on the 7th of June 2013. She was walking. She did not look back at the camera. She had no reason to. She was going to collect her children. That, at least, is what she had been told. Her estranged husband's brother had invited her to his flat at Arthur Millwood Court to spend time with her 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, the youngest of whom was 2 years old. It was a routine arrangement, the kind of visit that follows a separation, unremarkable on the surface. Her husband was already inside the flat when she arrived. She did not know that. 45 minutes after Rania Alayed walked through that door, her children were taken away by her brother-in-law. Shortly after that, her husband left the flat dressed in her clothing, her jeans, her top, her headscarf. He walked out wearing her clothes, past any camera that might record him, giving the impression to anyone watching that a woman had left the building alive. Rania did not leave that flat, not alive. For more than 11 years, her family did not know where she was. Her children grew up without knowing where their mother had been buried. Her son Yazan said, when human remains were finally found in February 2025, that being able to place flowers on a grave was more than he had dared to ask of the world. That is where this story ends. But to understand it, we have to start at the beginning, with a girl growing up in a refugee camp in Syria, and the man she was given to at the age of 15. This is the story of Rania Alayed. Now, if this is your first time here, I'm really glad you found this channel. Every day I dive deep into real criminal cases, breaking them down piece by piece so we can actually understand what happened and why. If that sounds like something you'd be into, go ahead and hit subscribe. It's free and it means a lot. Okay, now let's get back to the case. Rania Alayed was 25 years old. She had been born into a Palestinian family living in a refugee camp in Syria, and she had grown up in circumstances defined by displacement and limited choices. She was 15 years old when she married Ahmed Al-Khatib. He was 9 years older than her. In February 2005, the couple moved to the United Kingdom, settling first in Norton-on-Teesside, before eventually relocating to Salford in Greater Manchester. They had 3 children together. For the years that followed, Rania's world was shaped almost entirely by the boundaries her husband set around it. What changed, slowly and then with increasing certainty, was Rania herself. After the family moved to England, she began to take steps that were, by any ordinary measure, unremarkable. She enrolled at Openshaw College to study English. She made new friends outside the household. She began to dress differently, in a way that was less traditional. She was, by all accounts of those who knew her at that time, a woman who was finding her way toward independence, toward a version of her own life that she had not previously been able to access. She was described by those around her as someone who had embraced her new life with genuine enthusiasm. She was not hiding what she was doing. She was not conducting any of it in secret. She was learning a language. She was attending college. She was building friendships. These were not extraordinary acts. But within the world as her husband understood it, they were treated as transgressions. Weeks before she died, Rania told people close to her that she was afraid. She said she believed her husband might kill her. Those words did not save her, but they are part of the record now. And they are part of why this case matters beyond the facts of what happened in that flat in Salford on the 7th of June 2013. She had 3 children. She wanted a life. She had started, cautiously and bravely, to build one. She was 25 years old. Ahmed Al-Khatib was 35 years old at the time of Rania's death. He was a blacksmith by trade and had grown up in the same Syrian refugee camp community where he had met and married Rania. He was 9 years older than her at the time of their marriage. She was 15. The court heard that Al-Khatib had been violent toward Rania from an early stage of the relationship. After the move to England, the violence did not diminish. According to testimony at Manchester Crown Court, he subjected Rania to years of physical and sexual abuse within the marriage, and his behaviour became increasingly controlling as her life in England began to expand beyond the walls of their home. What drove that escalation, the prosecution argued, was a combination of jealousy and a specific understanding of honour. Al-Khatib had shown open resentment toward what he described as Rania's increasing westernization, her English classes, her new clothes, her friendships outside the home. He suspected her of communicating with other men. He interpreted her growing independence not as a personal development, but as a direct threat to his authority and to the honor of his family. In January 2013, Rania left. She took her 3 children and moved into a homeless refuge. She applied to the courts for orders to protect herself and her children from Al-Khatib. She was doing everything that the system asks a victim of domestic abuse to do. She had reported him. She had left. She had sought legal protection. Al-Khatib moved in with family in Gorton, nearby. The couple were separated, but they remained connected through the children, and that connection was the mechanism through which he would eventually reach her again. The broader picture that emerged at trial was of a man who did not regard Rania's decision to leave as something she was entitled to make. Separation, in his understanding of the world, was not a legitimate exit. It was a further act of dishonor, and the prosecution argued that he had decided, at some point during those months of separation, what the consequence of that dishonor would be. The 6 months between January and June 2013 trace a path that, in retrospect, has a clear direction. But it is important to understand what that path looked like at the time, because the people around Rania and the agencies that were supposed to be watching did not see it in the same way. Rania had left in January. She had gone to a refuge. She had begun legal proceedings. She was attending college. She was making friends. From the outside, it might have looked like the situation was resolving itself. A separation had occurred. A woman had removed herself and her children from a dangerous situation. The formal steps were being taken. What the evidence later established was that Al-Khatib had not accepted that the situation was resolving. He had spent those months in a state of growing grievance. The court heard that he had spoken to people around him about his feelings toward Rania, in terms that made clear his anger had not diminished with physical distance. Rania, for her part, was not unaware of the danger. She had told people she was afraid. She had told people she believed he might kill her. These were not vague anxieties. They were specific statements made in the weeks before her death. They were the words of someone who understood what she was living alongside, even as she continued to live her life. The case of Rania Alayed was later identified by the Independent Police Complaints Commission as part of a pattern of failures in how Greater Manchester Police had handled domestic abuse cases in 2013. Hers was one of 3 cases that year in which a woman known to police as a victim of domestic abuse was killed by her partner. The EPCC investigation took more than 4 years to complete and found very serious concerns and recurring systemic failures in the way those cases were managed. What that means, in practical terms, is that the warning signs were there, the reporting had been done. And still, on the evening of the 7th of June 2013, Rania walked toward a flat where her husband was waiting, because she had been told her children were there and she had no reason to believe anything different. She had told people he might kill her. She was right. The arrangement for the 7th of June had been made by Al-Khatib's brother, Muhammad. He contacted Rania and invited her to his flat at Arthur Millwood Court in Salford, telling her she could see her children there. It was a convincing reason to attend. She was separated from her husband. Not from her children. Of course she came. Before her arrival, Muhammad had cleared the flat of his own partner and children. Ahmed Al-Khatib was already inside, waiting. Approximately 45 minutes after Rania arrived, Muhammad left, taking Rania's children with him to their paternal grandparents. The children arrived by taxi. Their grandparents were told their mother had returned to Syria. Ahmed Al-Khatib strangled Rania inside that flat, while her children were still being taken away in the next room or shortly thereafter. At trial, he did not deny that she had died there. What he offered instead was an account so removed from credibility that it became one of the more striking moments of the proceedings. He claimed that Rania had appeared to him in the form of a jinn, an evil spirit, and that he had reacted by pushing the apparition away, only to realize it was Rania who had fallen and struck her head on a mirror. The jury did not accept that account. What followed the killing was a sequence of actions that demonstrated considerable presence of mind. Al-Khatib removed Rania's clothing and dressed himself in it, her jeans, her top, her headscarf. He then left the flat wearing her clothes, walking past any cameras that might record him, creating the visual impression that a woman had departed the building. He folded Rania's body into a large red suitcase. He accessed her social media accounts and sent messages to her family in her name, telling them she had moved to Turkey. Muhammad gave her mobile phone to an acquaintance who was traveling to Turkey, and that person sent a message to Rania's father from Turkish soil, saying she was getting remarried. Every piece of this was designed to create a version of events in which Rania had chosen to leave, was alive, and was simply unreachable. Rania's body was loaded into Muhammad's white camper van and transported northeast. The original plan had been to bury her in a remote woodland near Redcar. That plan failed when the camper van suffered a mechanical fault on the A19 in North Yorkshire. In a decision made on the roadside, they changed course and buried Rania beside a lay-by on the A19 near Thirsk, in soil that would hold her for more than 11 years. The investigation that eventually led to Al-Khatib's arrest and conviction was built from several directions simultaneously, none of them straightforward. Rania's friends raised concerns when she failed to attend a planned meeting on the 8th of June. That information was passed from Cleveland Police to Greater Manchester Police on the 9th of June. But it was not until the 2nd of July, following a phone call from Rania's uncle in Lebanon, that she was officially treated as a missing person. Nearly 4 weeks had passed since she was last seen. When Al-Khatib was questioned on the 3rd of July, he told investigators he had not seen Rania for months. and believed she was living in Turkey or Syria. He was arrested the following day on suspicion of murder. Shortly after his arrest, Muhammad contacted police and admitted that Rania was dead and that her body had been buried near the A19. The search that followed was one of the most extensive missing persons recovery operations in the region's recent history. Officers from Greater Manchester Police and North Yorkshire Police worked alongside teams from the Royal Engineers and the RAF. Specialist sniffer dogs were deployed. Forensic botanists and archaeologists were brought in to examine the terrain. A stretch of the A19, spanning between 15 and 19 miles, was systematically searched. The operation was called off in September 2013 without success. The trial at Manchester Crown Court in April 2014 relied on a combination of evidence categories. CCTV footage had captured Al-Khatib leaving the flat dressed in Rania's clothing, providing a direct visual record of his attempt to construct a false trail. Phone records and digital evidence traced the messages sent in Rania's name and the movement of her phone to Turkey. The testimony of Muhammad, who pleaded guilty to perverting the course of justice, provided an account of the disposal of the body and the route taken north. The accounts of people to whom Al-Khatib had spoken in the period before the killing also formed part of the prosecution's picture of premeditation. The question of where Rania's body actually lay would remain unanswered for more than a decade after the conviction. In late 2024, Ahmed Al-Khatib, serving his life sentence at the time, disclosed information from prison that gave investigators a more specific location within the Thirsk area. On the 25th of February 2025, officers from Greater Manchester Police located buried human remains adjacent to a lay-by on the A19 near Thirsk. Ground-penetrating radar, sniffer dogs, and aerial support had been used in the search. Detective Chief Inspector Neil Higginson confirmed that police strongly suspected the remains to be Rania's. As of the end of 2025, formal forensic identification remained outstanding, but the family had been informed and was being supported by specialist officers. What the evidence in this case reveals, when examined carefully, is not a man who snapped under pressure. It is a man who had spent years constructing a private world in which he was the sole authority, and in which any challenge to that authority was experienced not as disagreement, but as a form of attack. Understanding how that psychology operates is essential to understanding why Rania died, and why the warning signs that preceded her death were so easy to miss. The first element to observe is the specific nature of what Al-Khatib could not tolerate. It was not infidelity in any evidence sense. It was independence, English classes, new friendships, a different way of dressing. These were the things the court heard had driven his anger. This is consistent with a pattern identified by researchers who study honor-based abuse. The trigger is not always a single act, but a perceived drift away from prescribed behavior, a loss of control over how a woman presents herself to the world and who she is in contact with. The second element is the way the killing was framed by investigators and by the court. Detective Chief Inspector Phil Reed of Greater Manchester Police described the killing as an honor-based murder. The prosecutors stated that Rania had been killed for trying to achieve independence from her husband and for undergoing what they called westernization. This framing is not offered here as a cultural generalization. It is offered because it is the specific framing used by the prosecution and accepted by the jury, and because it points to a particular logic that operated in Al-Khatib's world. a logic in which a woman's choices about her own life are treated as actions that require a response. The third element is the degree of organization in what followed the killing, the staged departure, the borrowed clothing, the social media messages, the phone sent to Turkey, the involvement of two brothers in the disposal. These are not the actions of a man acting in panic or confusion. They reflect a sustained effort to construct an alternative narrative, carried out over hours and then maintained over days, while simultaneously managing the responses of family members who were asking questions. That level of sustained deception in the immediate aftermath of killing speaks to a capacity for compartmentalization that runs alongside and in many respects explains the controlled and systematic nature of the abuse that preceded it. The final element is the one that the sentencing judge, Mr. Justice Leggett, addressed most directly. He told Al-Khatib that the contempt he had shown for Rania in death was a match for the contempt with which he had treated her in life. That observation is not merely rhetorical. It describes a continuity of attitude across years and across acts, and it is important to name clearly. Rania Alayed had done what the system asks. She had reported the abuse to police. She had left the relationship. She had moved into a refuge. She had applied to the courts for protective orders. She was engaging with services, and she had told people, in the weeks before she died, that she was afraid her husband would kill her. She was right, and she was killed anyway. Her case was one of 3 in Greater Manchester in 2013, in which a woman who had been known to police as a victim of domestic abuse was subsequently murdered by her partner. 3 women. The same year, the same police force, the same outcome. The Independent Police Complaints Commission investigated. Its inquiry took more than 4 years. When its findings were published, it identified very serious concerns and described recurring systemic failures in the way Greater Manchester Police had handled domestic violence cases. Various members of GMP staff connected to Rania's case were found to have demonstrated poor or unsatisfactory performance. What that language means in practice is worth being direct about. There were points at which different decisions could have been made. There were points at which the information available to investigators, had it been acted upon differently, might have changed what happened to Rania. The EPCC report did not claim that better police handling would certainly have saved her life, but it established clearly that the handling fell short of what it should have been. This matters for reasons that go beyond accountability in a single case. The pattern the EPCC identified was not unique to 2013 or to Greater Manchester. Research on domestic homicide reviews consistently finds that a significant proportion of women killed by partners have had prior contact with police or other statutory agencies in the period before their deaths. The individual failures identified in any one case are almost always also systemic ones. The question is not only what went wrong in Rania's case specifically, it is what structures exist to ensure that the warning signs visible in her case are responded to differently the next time they appear in someone else's. Detective Chief Inspector Neil Higginson, speaking in February 2025, after the remains were found, said that Rania's murder had been utterly horrific, and that not knowing where her body was had inflicted further pain on everyone who had known her. He said he hoped the discovery would allow her family to finally give her a proper resting place. The question is not only whether Rania has a resting place now, It is whether the systems around her were adequate to the task of protecting her while she was alive. The EPCC found that they were not. In June 2014 at Manchester Crown Court, Mr. Justice Leggett sentenced Ahmed Al-Khatib to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 20 years. He told him directly that the contempt he had shown for Rania in death matched the contempt with which he had treated her throughout her life. Ahmed Al-Khatib, who had pleaded guilty to perverting the course of justice, was sentenced to 3 years. Hussein Al-Khatib, convicted of the same charge after trial, was sentenced to 4 years. For the 11 years that followed, Rania's family lived in a particular kind of grief. They knew she was dead. They knew she had been buried somewhere along a road in North Yorkshire. They did not know exactly where. Multiple searches had found nothing. Her children grew up with an absence that had no defined location, no grave to visit, no physical marker of where their mother lay. In late 2024, Al-Khatib disclosed information from prison that gave investigators a more precise location. On the 25th of February 2025, after a targeted search using ground-penetrating radar and specialist dogs, Greater Manchester Police located buried human remains beside the A19 near Thirsk. They stated they strongly suspected those remains to be Rania's. Formal forensic identification remained outstanding at the end of 2025. Her son Yazan spoke after the discovery. He said that being able to provide a final resting place was all the family had wanted. He said that to have the ability to lay down a few flowers for his mother was more than he could ask for from the world. He was a young child when his mother walked into that flat in Salford and did not come back. He grew up knowing what had been done to her and not knowing where she had been put. That is what 11 years without an answer looks like, reduced to a single sentence about the value of flowers. Rania Alayed was 25 years old. She had survived a childhood in a refugee camp. She had survived years of abuse inside a marriage she had not chosen. At an age when she had no means to refuse, she had found her way, in England, to something that resembled a life of her own. She had enrolled in college, she had made friends, she had left. She had asked for protection. She was not protected, and for more than a decade, she could not even be brought home. If this case has raised questions for you about honor-based abuse or coercive control, the Karma Nirvana Helpline offers specialist support Monday to Friday. Links are in the description below. If you found this video valuable, please subscribe and share it. The next case will be with you soon.